Ordine mundus, in nos etas ultima uvenit, or nos dura sorte crea.
Oh, that some whirling wind would carry me away into the sky, or wrap my head in darkest clouds to banish from my sight so foul a deed.
What is your news? Whatever evil you have seen, reveal it.
First, let the tumult of my mind be stilled, and fear release my body from its grip. A picture of the brutal deed still floats before my eyes. Carry me far away, wild winds, far from this place. Take me away to where the journey of the daylight ends.
You only hold us longer in suspense. Describe this deed you shudder at, and name the author of it. Nay, I ask not who, but which of them. Come, speak without delay.
Part of the royal house of Pelops stands upon the summit of the citadel, facing the west, and at its outer edge, it towers above the city like a mountain, ready to crush the people should they rise in insolent revolt against their kings. Deep in the secret heart of this domain, down in a hollow, is an ancient grove, the sanctuary of the royal house. Here grow no trees of pleasant aspect, none that any pruner's knife has cultivated. Yew and dark cypress and black ilex twine, a tangled canopy of shade, above a tall oak towers and dominates the grove. A spring under the shadow of the trees forlornly drips and spreads its sluggish water into a somber pool, like that dark river Styx by whose name the gods are known to swear under this ground at dead of night. 'Tis said the gods of death are heard to utter groans, chains rattle in the grove and spirits cry. There sights are seen that mortals quake to hear of. The ghosts of men of ancient time emerge from their old tombs and wander in the wood. Specters more strange than any known elsewhere invade the place. Flames flicker on the trees, and neighboring roofs appear to be on fire, though no fire burns within. Sometimes the grove is filled with sounds of barking, thrice repeated. Sometimes gigantic phantoms haunt the place. Daylight brings no relief from these alarms. The grove's own darkness is the dark of night, and even at high noon the ghostly powers retain their sway. Into this place came Atreus, like a man possessed with madness, with his brother's children dragged at his heels. The altars are prepared, but oh, what words are fit to tell what happened? He tied the prince's hands behind their backs and bound their hapless heads with purple fillets. Incense was used and consecrated wine. The salt and meal dropped from the butcher's knife upon the victims' heads. All solemn rites fulfilled to make this act of infamy a proper ritual.
Who held the knife?
He was the sacrificial priest. His voice boldly intoned the liturgy of death and spoke the funeral prayers beside the altar. He stood alone and laid his own hand upon the three appointed to be slain, placed them before him, and took up the knife. He saw that all was done, and all was done according to the rites of sacrifice. A shudder shook the grove. The palace rocked over the trembling earth and seemed to hang as if uncertain whether it should fall this way or that. And on the left, a star traced out an angry furrow in the sky. The sacrificial wine was changed to blood. The diadem upon the royal head fell twice or three times to the ground. Tears dripped from ivory in the temples. Every man was moved to horror at these prodigies. Atreus alone, intent upon his purpose, remained immovable, even defiant against the menacing gods. Without delay, he strode up to the altar, and there stood with scowling eyes glaring this way and that, eyeing the victims doomed to satisfy his impious vengeance. Which shall be the first for slaughter, which the second head to fall? As if it mattered. But he won't be hurried. He wants to have his ghastly deed performed in proper order.
which was slaughtered first?
The first. No one can say that Atreus failed in duty to his ancestors. The first was dedicated to his grandfather. The first to be dispatched was young Tantalus.
What look, what bearing did the young man show in face of death?
He held himself erect, unflinching. Prayers that would have died unheard he scorned to utter. With a savage blow, the king drove in the sword and pressed it home until his hand was at the throat. The body stood, with the sword plucked out as if deciding which way to fall, then fell against the king. Immediately, the brutal murderer seized Plisthenes and dragged him to the altar to add his body to his brother's, struck and hacked the head off. The truncated corpse fell forward to the ground, and from the head that rolled away, a faint last sob was heard.
And after those two butcheries, what next? A third, or did he spare the youngest child?
Think of a tawny lion in Armenia crouching amid the vanquished carcasses of a whole herd of oxen, jaws agape and wet with blood. His hunger satisfied, but not his fury. He will stalk the bulls this way and that, and still with flagging speed and slackening mouth make passes at the cows. So Atreus, still with fury unassuaged, his sword now reeking with two victims' blood, fell on the third, and with no thought of mercy for the defenseless child whom he attacked so violently, pierced the body through. The sword that entered by the breast was seen protruding from the back. The boy fell dead. His spurting blood damped out the altar fires, and through both wounds his spirit fled away.
Inhuman outrage.
Do you shudder now? If this had been the end of this foul deed, you could have called him innocent.
What more? What more stupendous, more atrocious crime can man conceive?
No, this was not the end. Only a step upon the villain's way.
Could he do more? He threw the bodies out for beasts to maul, denied them funeral fire.
Denied them fire? Ah, would that were so. Would that he denied them burial, denied them the consuming flames, left them to be a meal for birds, a hideous banquet for savage beasts. Well might their father pray for what most fathers would abhor to see, the unburied bodies of his sons. Oh, sin incredible to any age of man, and for the men of ages yet to come, a thing to be declared impossible. The entrails torn from the warm bodies lay quivering, veins still throbbing, shocked hearts beating. Atreus picked at the pieces, scrutinized the message of the fates, noted the signs in the internal organs hot with blood. Finding no blemish in the sacrifice, he was content and ready to prepare the banquet for his brother. Hacked the bodies limb from limb, detached the outstretched arms close to the shoulders, severed the ligaments that tie the elbow joints, stripped every part, and roughly wrenched each separate bone away. All this he did himself. Only the faces and trusting, suppliant hands he left intact. And soon, the meat is on the spits, the fat drips over a slow fire, while other parts are tossed to boil in singing copper pans. The fire seems loath to touch the roasted flesh. 2 or 3 times it has to be repaired to feed the crackling hearth, and still, reluctant to do as it is told, burns sulkily. The liver on the spits was heard to squeal. Which cried the more, the bodies or the flames, it would be hard to say. Above the flames a pitch-black smoke ascended, and this too refused to rise up to the roof, but hung a thick and noisome cloud, filling the house with hideous vapors. Then, O patient Phoebus, Thy light was sunk in darkness at midday, and thou hast fled. Thou shouldst have left us sooner. The Father bites into his children's bodies, chews his own flesh in his accursed mouth, drowsy with wine, his glistening hair anointed with scented oil. He crams his mouth with food till it can hold no more. O doomed Thyestes, this is the one good part of your misfortune. You do not know what you suffer. Not for long will this be true. The Lord of Heaven, the sun, may turn his chariot back and drive away. Black night may rise untimely from the east, and total darkness in the midst of day veil this atrocious deed. But you must see and know your own misfortune to the full.
Sive expolimus, abeam quaestos This is the fear that knocks at the heart, that the whole world is now to fall in the ruin, which fate foretells that chaos will come again to bury the world of gods and men, that nature a second time will wipe out all the lands that cover the earth and the seas that lie around them and all the stars that scatter their brightest lights across the universe. All mingled into one vast void will fall the multitude of gods. And are we, chosen out of all Earth's children to perish in the last catastrophe of a disjointed universe? Are we to see the world's end come? A cruel fate brought us to birth if we have lived to lose the sun, or if our sins have driven him away. But we must not complain, nor fear. Too fond of life is he who would not die when all the world dies with him.